South Africa's record in prosecuting serious cases of corruption seems not to be inspiring to most citizens. One example is the 25 million rand Nulane Investments criminal trial. This is where the High Court has found several key pieces of evidence inadmissible. Now, anti-corruption watchdog Accountability Now submitting a proposal to Parliament to establish a new Chapter 9 institution. This, they say, is to deal with serious corruption. Let's talk to the man who leads Accountability Now, and that's Advocate Paul Hoffman. And Advocate, good morning to you and happy Human Rights Day. This conversation coming on such a day, make the link for us as to why you are proposing this new Chapter 9 institution and what might it add to South Africa's fight, at least stated fight, in the words of President Ramaphosa, against crime and corruption.
Good morning, Collie, and happy Human Rights Day to you as well. The connection is actually quite fitting that we should be having this discussion on Human Rights Day, because the law, as determined by the majority judgment in the Glenister case of 2011, is that in order to protect and respect and promote and fulfill human rights, it is obligatory that the South African government has to have anti-corruption machinery of state that complies with the criteria that have been laid down in binding fashion in that Glenister case of 2011. Criteria that have been ignored on the Zuma watch and on the Ramaphosa watch, not responded to adequately at all.
Yeah.
Perhaps for the benefit of your viewers, let's just name the 5 main criteria, because these are the measure of your anti-corruption machinery of state. The first is that they should be specialized. If you don't have specialists who are dedicated to dealing with serious corruption, you don't get off the ground. The corruption docket gets put at the bottom of the pile. They need to be trained in a way that makes them better than the devious, corrupt operators. They need to be independent in the sense that they are free of executive influence, interference, or impedance. They need to be properly resourced. That is the 4th criteria. Resourced in a way that is guaranteed so that there is always petrol in the tank for them to do their work. And then, very importantly, the last of the 5 criteria is that they should be secure in their tenure of office, that they are able to do their work without fear of being dismissed, reassigned, or disappeared.
Yeah.
Those criteria have become known as the STIRS criteria, that acronym, specialized, trained, independent, resourced, and secure, is the main ingredients of the recipe for anti-corruption machinery of state. We have not had effective and efficient anti-corruption machinery in South Africa since the demise of the Scorpions back in 2009. So the proposal that we have put to Parliament, funnily enough, on the 12th anniversary of the handing down of the judgment on St. Patrick's Day back in 2011.
Yeah.
Our suggestion is that rather than persisting with hawks who have never caught a big fish in their entire existence, and with a national prosecuting authority that, with the best will in the world, is still hollowed out and is still gutted and is still infested with saboteurs who've been placed in the National Prosecuting Authority to ensure that the politically well-connected corrupt operators continue to enjoy the impunity from accountability which they have enjoyed since the demise of the Scorpions unit, which did work well, but didn't have that last S, the secure in tenure of office criteria.
Okay.
So we've presented that as a suggestion to Parliament. I'm afraid the political will to make the necessary reform has yet to be generated, but we have the law on our side, and because we are seeking really to get government to apply itself to implementing the law properly, it is still possible to litigate this problem.
Advocate Hoffman, perhaps with just the last point, where the secure in tenure, some people will say, okay, maybe you may have a point there, and that could possibly be debated further. But as far as specialization, independence, properly resourced, Shamila Patoy will probably tell a different story and say that we certainly do operate with a measure of independence, and that we are resourced. There's more money that gets announced every financial year to try and capacitate the National Prosecuting Authority. And add to that, what they say lately is investigations that are prosecutorially led. And so what is wrong then with this architecture of crime fighting or corruption fighting in South Africa? And at which point are we going to say we are now satisfied that the NPA is properly equipped to fight corruption?
But while the NPA is under the final responsibility of the Minister of Justice, who's part of the executive, obviously, and while the NPA has as its accounting officer the Director General in the Department of Justice, it is not independent. Last year, Shamila Patoy went to Parliament and pleaded for the independence of the NPA to be put on a constitutionally sound footing in the sense in which the term independence is used in the Glenister case. And she got absolutely no traction there at all. You'll remember that when the State Capture Commission report was handed down, the Chief Justice said, we need an army of prosecutors to deal with what has been revealed in that report. The National Prosecuting Authority has only 6,000 members of staff, and most of them work in the Magistrates Court, which is not where serious corruption matters will be dealt with. They will be dealt with in the High Court. So she does not have the staff, let alone the skills that are required to successfully prosecute. You mentioned the Nulani case in your intro. There is a stunning example of inexperienced prosecutors having rings run around them by the senior counsel who are employed by corrupt operators who are seeking to avoid accountability for what they have done. That kind of thing will not happen if you have an elite Chapter 9 institution of specialists who are dealing with corruption and corruption only in accordance with those STIRS criteria. And at the moment, most of the investigative work is done by the Hawks, who are a priority crime investigation unit. That is their official name, the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigations. And because there are other priority crimes on their menu, they don't get round to the serious corruption cases. Becky Chele, for example, has been under investigation since 2010 for his involvement in those police headquarter leases that were negotiated at 3 times the going rate. That has never, ever got to the point of a prosecution, and we are now 13 years down the track from the Soccer World Cup.
Yeah. And
when the investigating directorate of the NPA was formed by proclamation by President Ramaphosa, and the Chele investigation was referred to them, guess what they did? They gave it back to the Hawks. That is the kind of falling around, that's irrational falling around, that is going on in the Criminal Justice Administration in South Africa at present, and the only way to address it is to develop the political will to reform the enforcement capacity of our criminal justice administration when it comes to serious corruption. We've said serious corruption is over 5 million. They can say it's over 10 million if they want to, or they can say it's over 1 million if they want to. That is a political decision. But serious corruption is going unaddressed, and it is really a destructive force that threatens our democracy.
Final point, Advocate Hoffman. Let's talk funding. Recently, we have had much debate about whether or not the National Prosecuting Authority should take in donor funding, funds that come outside of government, and some people saying that that might threaten the independence. In fact, it might weaken the independence of the prosecuting authority. I know you are already on record as saying the prosecuting authority, National Prosecuting Authority, isn't really that independent if you really look into it. So where might the funding come from then for this new Chapter 9 specialized institution?
As we understand the position in relation to state capture, there's somewhere between 1 and 3 trillion rand on the table in the form of loot. A properly capacitated anti-corruption body, such as this Chapter 9 institution, will recover multiple amounts of the cost that it will take to run it. And that it's such low-hanging fruit that the ability of the Criminal Justice Administration as reformed to seize and to forfeit the proceeds of corruption will solve all funding problems, and I have no difficulty with the private sector funding a properly independent body, because a properly independent body will not be swayed by the source of its funding. Judges are funded by the state. They do not find in favor of the state because they are funded by the state, and a properly independent body of corruption busters will live up to that same standard of independent activity in the interests of the people of South Africa, in the interests of complying with our international obligations to fight corruption, and in the interests of properly rolling out the Bill of Rights by respecting, protecting, promoting, and fulfilling all of those human rights guaranteed to everybody in South Africa since the dawn of democracy.
Advocate Paul Hoffman, Director at Accountability Now, thank you very much for your time.